On today's Locked On Jayhawks, the 10 best wins for Kansas during the 2024 calendar year.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what's happening? Derek Johnson here. This is Locked On Jayhawks. Thanks for making it your first listen every day. Thank you to the everydayers catching each and every show. And on today's edition of Locked On Jayhawks, we're going to be going over the top 10 wins for Kansas basketball during the 2024 calendar year. So you're talking about the end of the 23-24 season and the beginning of the 24-25 season. Before we get into any of that, today's episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel because right now new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com and you can get started today. Okay, so these are going to be the 10 best wins for KU basketball over the course of the year. And again, this is just a subjective list, right? I mean, ranked wins seem to matter more. I guess wins on the road, tournament wins, games that were significant or fun to watch, like those matter too. So let's get started with number 10 on the list, which was Kansas 86, Texas 67. This was on Saturday, February 24th. Obviously, all of these in 2024. And you look at it, Kansas just kind of dominated this game from the word go. It was 18-15 after the first 10 minutes of the game. But from then on, Kansas just, blew them out. They were up 20 points at the break. You kind of were able to coast to the finish line. And coming into this game in which you beat Texas, you had just won on the road. I know, right? Kansas won a road game in the Big 12. Who would have thought, right? But you had won on the road after really struggling with that. Then you win this home game against Texas in big fashion, and you were looking at your final four games after this one, and it was, versus BYU at Baylor versus K-State at Houston, thinking, okay, you take care of business at home, maybe you win one of the two on the road, and now you're hot going into the postseason. Now you're cooking. Well, it didn't work out that way. You lost 4 of your next 5 after this game, but at the time, this one felt like a significant result for you to come through. And, Texas wasn't a great team or anything last year, but again, you did blow them out. DeJuan Harris had 14 points, 6 assists with no turnovers in this game. He was really good. Hunter Dickinson had 9 points, 7 rebounds. Even Nick Timberlake pitched in. He had 13 points for KU and was 3 of 6 from the floor. How about this? 6 of 8 from the free throw line for Nick Timberlake. Is that the reason Kansas can't get to the free throw line this season, that they don't have a Nick Timberlake to just get them to the free throw? No. But in all honesty, KJ Adams is great too. He had 16 points on 8 of 12 shooting with 8 rebounds. That's right, 8 rebounds for KJ Adams. So that was a fun one for KU. It's always fun when you don't really have to sweat them. So that one in at number 10. Number 9 on the list is the game that I kind of refer to as the Johnny Furphy game. That would be the 74-69 victory over Cincinnati in Allen Fieldhouse. This was back on January 22nd. And Cincinnati ended up not being an NCAA tournament team. They were close to doing it. They had a solid team this year. They've been excellent so far this season. But this was a game where you ended up winning by 5, 74-69. It felt like a game you were in control of for a majority of it. You were never blowing them out, but you were in control of it. And then you had a couple possessions toward the end of the game that allowed them to tighten it up. And so looking back, only winning by 5, you don't win this game without the performance of Johnny Furphy. Now, this was a game Kevin McCuller was still healthy, but Johnny Furphy was the MVP for KU. 23 points, 7 of 8 from the floor, 4 of 4 on twos, 3 of 4 on threes. He added 11 rebounds with 2 steals. Johnny Furphy was phenomenal for KU. This was toward the beginning part of him becoming a starter and really breaking out. I mean, obviously Furphy, the efficiency dropped off over the past final month or so of his season, but this was during the hot streak for Furphy, and it was a really fun game for that to happen. You had Kevin McCuller still, like I said, who ended up with 20 points, not great efficiency in the game, but he did at least do that. And that kind of won Kansas the game because you only got 10 points from Hunter Dickinson down low, but Johnny Furphy was so good, and the Kansas defense was able to at least limit, or maybe Cincinnati just had a bad shooting night. They were 3 of 18 from 3, but that was a nice win for KU. All right, number 8 is a game that wasn't like a great game just in terms of like if you're a neutral fan, but Kansas beat Baylor 64-61 back on February 10th. So again, this is a lower scoring game. This wasn't a game that was marred by both teams actually shot the ball well on 2-point shots, both around 55%. Neither team shot it well from 3-point range. Baylor had a turnover issue. They had 21 turnovers in this game. Kansas, meanwhile, couldn't get any offensive rebounds. They only had 4 of them. So like in different ways, the two teams kind of limited their amount of shots. It wasn't a pretty game to watch. But this was a game without Kevin McCuller that you gritted your way into beating a Baylor team that obviously was solid last year, got another 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. DeJuan Harris had 14 points, 5 assists to 1 turnover, 2 steals. Furphy had 11 points in a game that he was 0 for 6 from 3. KJ Adams had 13 points. Hunter Dickinson had 15 points. Timberlake had 8 off the bench, but he was 2 of 7 from 3. So, you go 2 of 13 from 3 between Furphy and Timberlake, but you grit your way out to winning. Those are some of Bill Self's best wins. So, close game. You beat a pretty good opponent, but, outside of that, it doesn't have a lot of luster to that win. All right, number 7 on the list is I mentioned the Texas game where Kansas was coming off a Big 12 road win. That was at Oklahoma, and that is number 7 on the list. Kansas goes into Norman, wins at Oklahoma on Saturday, February 17th, 67-57. This game did not start in a really great way for KU. They got down early. In fact, Oklahoma ended up leading by 5 at the half. But it was one of those games where even though Oklahoma was up 5 at the half, it felt like they were up more. And then Kansas hit a bigger. The final 10 minutes was the big differentiator. Kansas wins the game by 10. They outscored Oklahoma 26-14 over the final 10 minutes of the game. And the big reason why, DeJuan Harris, 11 points, 7 assists to 0 turnovers. Hunter Dickinson was great. He had 20 points, 16 rebounds, 4 assists for KU. Johnny Furphy ended up with 15 points on 5 of 8 shooting. He hit 3 3-pointers and added 9 rebounds, 3 steals. Kevin McCuller played in this game. He had 8 rebounds to go 10 points. The KU starters were really good. Even KJ had 9 points, 4 rebounds, 2 assists. KU got nothing from the bench. They had 2 points in this game, which that was the story of last season. And again, this isn't like an up and down 67-57. Like Oklahoma shot 29% on 2-point shots. They were 8 of 23, so better, but it's not like scorching from 3. This was an ugly basketball game, but the fact that Kansas won on the road when this season they have struggled, when last season they struggled on the road again, over last season and this season, you're 3-10 on the road. So the fact that you won a Big 12 road game, looking back, that one becomes a little bit more meaningful, the fact that you did it. And also, in addition to that, I believe this is their most recent road win, which is pretty crazy to think about. We're about to get to, they don't have another chance to play on the road. So we're going to go into the 2025 calendar year saying the last time Kansas won a road game was February 17th of the previous year. But that's the significance of that one, and that's why it is number 7 on the list. Number 6 on the top 10 best Kansas Jayhawks basketball wins of the 2024 calendar year is their win over Michigan State in the Champions Classic this season. So November 12th of this year at State Farm Arena. Was not a great environment for the game. Didn't like the event being in Atlanta. Seems like you get a little more juice when it's in like Indy and Chicago and New York and stuff like that. And I think part of the reason was that when you do it in Atlanta, it's going to mostly be like Kentucky fans. And so they have the second game. It's going to take some time for them to show up. But you ended up having a game that, again, like this one wasn't the prettiest game in the world. In fact, the first half was darn ugly. It was very ugly. The second half, things picked up a little bit, right? Kansas scores 47 in the second half. Michigan State scores 45 in the second half. So, the second half, things did pick up after you saw the early season woes in the first half for really both teams. Now, neither team could shoot well for the entire game. A combined 8 of 41 from 3 between the two teams. Hunter Dickinson was amazing in this game. 28 points, 12 rebounds for KU. How about getting 10 rebounds, 7 assists from Zeke Mayo? Wasn't really a great offensive scoring game, I should say, for him, but he did so well there. DeJuan Harris had 11 points, 6 assists to 0 turnovers. Rylan Griffin had a good finish to the game and finished with 10 points and 6 rebounds. And you found a way to kind of win a physical basketball game against a Michigan State team that wanted to get the ball inside, that did get the ball inside. I mean, Jackson Kohler had 12 points and 10 rebounds for the Spartans. This is a good win. I mean, anytime you beat whoever you're playing in the Champions Classic, like typically that's going to be a respected win. And at the time, Michigan State was, okay, this is a decent team. Like, they'll probably be an NCAA tournament team, but like, just how good are they? Well, they've been better since that point. They're now up to 22nd on KenPom. As of me recording this, they're 10-2. They've only lost one game since then, and it was in the Maui Invitational against Memphis, who looks to be pretty good this season. Like, they have some decent wins along the resume. Like, that win is going to age even better for KU as it goes on. So I think that was an impressive win, and it's always fun when you have the Champions Classic win when maybe more eyes are on you. Let's get into our top 5 after this timeout. This is Locked On Jayhawks. And this episode of the show is brought to you by Rocket Money, a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That is rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Top 10 best Kansas Jayhawks basketball wins for the 2024, calendar year. Obviously, it's not one season, but the calendar year. If you want to check out the best wins of the Lance Leipold era for KU football, we did that on yesterday's show, and then we'll be back to more normal, everyday recordings, everyday news and info and everything you could want in game recaps, game previews starting next week. So thanks for joining us here on Locked On Jayhawks. All right, into the top 5 for the best wins. Number 5 is going to be KU's win on Senior Day. That was on March 5th against Kansas State. 90-68. So the significance of this one is it's Senior Day, which you kept that streak alive. Kansas over 30 straight wins on Senior Day. The other significance, right, when you beat your in-state rival in Kansas State, like that adds significance to it. Also, when you blow them out, maybe that makes it even more fun, right? Kansas also scored 90 points, which the offense wasn't great overall last season. So to see them be able to go off like that, in a game where they only shot 13 3-pointers, but, scored 90 points is unbelievable. They did go 6 of 13, so shot them at a good percentage. The reason that they scored so much is actually, I don't really know. Looking back at this box score, they shot 45% on 2-point shots, right? I mean, it was low volume from 3. Okay, here it is. Free throw line, 28 of 31, 90% at the free throw line. That is unbelievable. Kansas has not been a great free throw shooting team, and the fact they were getting there so much. I mean, this year, obviously, they've been one of the lowest free throw rate attempt teams in the country. But you look at it, they were able to get to the free throw line that night. Hunter Dickinson wound up just 5 of 16 from the floor, but he had 15 points and 20 rebounds to go with 5 blocks for KU. So that's about as good of a 5 of 16 game as you could ask for. Kevin McCuller was back for this one. He goes for 19 points. Then you have Nick Timberlake. I mean, just a Senior Day stud, 18 points, 6 of 7 from the floor, 4 of 5 from 3-point range. KJ Adams goes for 16 points, 5 rebounds on 5 of 10 shooting, and then Johnny Furphy added 8 points off the bench. This was just an all-around effort for KU. Their largest lead was 81-53 with 4:04 remaining, so it wasn't even as close as the final score indicated. And this exercised a little bit of demons, I guess you could say, for KU, because coming into this game, they had just lost 2 consecutive games, BYU and Baylor, with one of those coming at home, both of them by 8 points. This was your final regular season win of the season. This was your second to last win overall of the season. It was your last win with a full roster with Kevin McCuller and everything like that. So Senior Day versus K-State, number 5 on the list. All right, number 4 on the list. Maybe this should be higher because in theory, postseason wins are the most valuable, right? Like if you were offering to trade regular season win for the postseason win, you always take the postseason win in that 1-to-1 vacuum, at least for the most part. I'm trying to think I don't know. Is there like an alternative where that wouldn't be the case? I don't know. Like, would you trade? This would actually be an interesting conversation. Quick side note: would you trade Kansas beating Oklahoma in triple overtime on what is it, like January 4th, 2016, something like that? Would you trade that for Kansas? This one you would, because you know what happened in the second round, but like, I don't know, a year where maybe it was like a Sweet 16 win where you lost in the Elite Eight. That would be an interesting conversation because you might remember the 3 overtime one. But anyway, argue amongst yourselves. I think that's an interesting conversation. But number 4 on the list is Kansas's NCAA tournament win in the first round over Samford, 93-89. Tournament wins in general, important. This was actually an exciting game. It was back and forth. Samford pressed. They played that bucky ball, which was it was a very entertaining style of play, right? It led to them shooting a lot of threes. They made 16 threes. It led to an up and down tempo. It led to a fast-paced game. It was fun. You had Kansas looking really good. Then you had Kansas almost blowing the game, finding a way to win at the very end, benefited a little bit from a call that should have gone against them at the very end. But Kansas ends up coming through. KJ Adams, 20 points on 10 of 13 shooting, 6 assists, 4 rebounds, and a block. Hunter Dickinson had 19 points, 20 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 blocks. Juwan Harris had 13 points, 7 assists, 3 rebounds. Johnny Furphy had 16 points. Nick Timberlake had 19 points, and he was 5 of 8 from the floor. Everybody's stats are going to look better when you have an up-and-down game like this, and that was the case for KU. They couldn't really stop Samford, though. Like, they were a matchup problem with the way they spaced the floor and shot the ball from the outside from 3. But Kansas wound up surviving. It was a fun game. NCAA tournament games, they count, they mean more, right? And so that's why that one is in at number 4 on the list, but maybe it should be higher. I do think this. If Kansas ends up making a Final Four last season, right, they go on a deep run, and that was the start of it, that one would be higher on the list. But the reason I only have it at number 4 and not higher, even though tournament wins, like I said, do matter more, is the fact that you know what happened in the second round. You get blown out to Gonzaga, right? So in theory, yes, it's still better. Like, I'd still rather lose in the second round than lose in the first round, but it's not as prominent. Like, you don't think back of it as fondly, I guess, knowing what happened the very next game. All right, let's get into the top 3 here. Number 3 on the list, I'm going to go with KU's win at the beginning of this non-con on November 4th against the North Carolina Tar Heels. Another high-scoring game, 92-89, another high-paced, fast-tempo game, another game where you almost let the opponent come back and beat you, but you were able to come through in the end. And this was one where North Carolina came storming back. KU looked, I mean, if you bottled up KU's first half, was that their best half of the season? It's certainly up there. I guess you could maybe take, like, I don't know, you didn't blow out Duke, but beating Duke is very impressive. So you could put that one up there, for instance. But KJ Adams was really good. He had 14 points. He had a couple assists, a couple rebounds. Juwan Harris ended up with 10 points. Hunter Dickinson had 20 points and 10 rebounds. But it was a thing where Hunter was struggling on the defensive end, but then he helps make the big stop at the end, and he hits a couple buckets late to get you over the hump. Zeke Mayo was awesome off the bench, 21 points. He ended up with 5 rebounds, 4 assists as well. AJ Storr was really good, 13 points. And Floyd Badunga had 8 points, 8 rebounds off the bench for the Jayhawks. So this was a fun game, back and forth. Anytime that you get together another blue blood and you beat them, like, that becomes a game that you're going to remember. And we haven't seen Kansas and North Carolina play in a regular season matchup in quite some time. And then you add to it some of the recent matchups being tournament matchups where they've become more prominent. You think about them more. That one goes up there, even though Carolina hasn't been as good as you'd think this season. All right, we're going to finish up top 2 best wins for KU basketball during the 2024 year. This is Locked On Jayhawks. And our episode of the show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, FanDuel has bets for which player is going to score a touchdown, how many points each team is going to score, who's going to make a catch on the first drive. Just visit FanDuel.com. You can join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL and the Locked On Podcast Network. Finishing things up with our top 2 best wins for KU basketball during the 2024 year. Again, this is kind of dividing 2 seasons in it. Number 2 on the list, we're going to go with Duke, 75-72 in Vegas. You could argue this one could be number 1. You could argue the tournament one, I think. But I'm going to go with this one at number 2. We'll get into why number 1 in a second. The reason this one is high on the list, though, I mean, again, anytime you're playing a blue blood, anytime you're beating a blue blood, it becomes prominent. The added fact that you were going against Cooper Flagg, who's probably going to be the number 1 pick in the draft and is being talked about as like this generational number 1 pick, that certainly adds to the lore as well, especially when you have KJ Adams, who, you know, has been scrutinized in a lot of ways, coming up with a very big game and being unbelievable on the defensive end of the court to help you get through with the win. You had the Hunter Dickinson ejection from the game. You had DeJuan Harris going for 14 points, 9 assists. You had Zeke Mayo going for 12 points and hitting that late kind of floater that bounced in off the rim. Rylan Griffin struggling in the first half, but coming through with those final 10 minutes or so. Flory Badunga, having to man more minutes with Hunter Dickinson out and playing well. And it was just a fun game, right? It was kind of a back and forth game. Like neither team really at a point you felt like was like going to run away with the game. I know KU started out really hot, but you knew Duke was going to come back. It was so early in that game. It was just a fun game in Vegas, and to come through with that win, like beating another top tier opponent, like there's a good chance Duke, the ACC is not great this year. Like Duke's going to win a lot more games. There's a good chance Duke ends up a 1 seed, and there's a good chance that like 2 or 3 SEC teams get a 1 seed. My assumption, what's going to happen, you're going to probably get like 2 SEC teams, Big 12 winner, and then like Duke, because they're just going to rack up all these wins as 1 seeds. And if Kansas ends up winning the Big 12, you're going to have that tiebreak over Duke. So it's a very big win, and it always is anytime those 2 square up. All right, our number 1 on the list, though, it doesn't have the blue blood pedigree, but it is the win over Houston, 78-65. And this one was not as good of a game overall as being back and forth with the Duke one. But the reason I have this one even higher on the list is because Houston, when you beat them last season, like they were number 1 on Ken Palm. I don't remember where they were in terms of some of the polls and everything. You blasted them 78-65. And to me, that was the most impressive display that we've seen from Kansas over this calendar year, right? Like beating a team as good as Houston by 13 points in a game that at one point you led by 20 with 12 minutes to go. And if LJ Cryer doesn't, have 24 points, then it's even more bananas. But I mean, the KU offense against typically for Houston, they've been one of the best, if not the best defenses over the last, 5 years of college basketball. And you just eviscerated them. 25 of 32 on 2-point shots. That's 78% on 2-point shots, 46% on 3-point shots. The only thing that kept them in the game besides LJ Cryer going off was Kansas had 18 turnovers and Houston only had 3. But in a game where you had 15 more turnovers than them, you beat one of the best teams in the country by 13 points. And it was a little bit of everybody. Kevin McCuller, who was healthy in this game, had 17 points with 7 rebounds. KJ Adams had 10 points on 4 of 5 with 7 assists, 4 rebounds. Johnny Furphy had 17 points on 6 of 7, 8 rebounds. Hunter Dickinson, 20 points, 8 rebounds, 4 assists. He even got 5 points off the bench from Parker Brown, including, I forget if it was banked in or not. I think it was. He hit that deep 3 toward the end of a shot clock in 1 possession. It was just it was Kansas's game, right? And that, again, it was, even though I guess the meaning of the win didn't maybe end up being as much because you didn't win the Big 12 or something like that, that was, I think, KU clicking on all cylinders to the best of their ability more than any other game we've seen from start to finish in the year of 2024. All right, what do you think should be higher? What do you think should be lower? Did anything miss the list? Let us know at D Johnson Radio on Twitter, at Derek Johnson on Blue Sky. That'll do it for this episode of the show. Back to regular programming next week. So thanks for joining us here today, all week. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. See you next time with Locked On Jayhawks.